Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final session of today's Spring Recruitment Training Day, where we will cover creating more effective virtual outreach and programs. Throughout this event, you've learned about highlighting your chapter values, you've learned about finding innovative ways to showcase your chapter values, and now we're going to explore creating programs that support those values. Before we get too far into the creating part of all this, we're going to take the first step into better understanding outreach and quickly move into how outreach is coupled with a values exhibition. Virtual outreach and programs pretty clearly points to online avenues, and we're going to zone in on social media since that's a pretty popular method of outreach for most chapters right now. Beyond social media, we'll work through virtual information sessions and following up and through with communications for new and existing members. Lastly, we'll leave you with some steps to take once you are ready to absorb this information and once you get the chance to talk to your chapter about it. Before we dive in, I do want to point out that throughout this session, we will provide a series of questions for you to reflect upon and help lead you to solutions and ideas that work for your chapter. Now, first up here, understanding outreach. Opportunities to reach others right now are more plentiful than ever. We are in an era where technology is really at our leisure, and we have the opportunity to use it to our advantage in APO. So let's get to defining outreach. Outreach is the activity of providing services to any population that may not otherwise have access to those services. For APO, that could mean a lot of things, and more specifically to your chapter, even more. That, of course, dives into leadership, friendship, service, but take it one step further and ask yourself first and foremost, what population does your chapter serve? You can certainly include active members in this conversation, potential new members, alumni, but even beyond that, when you think of your service programs, who are you serving? Take a second to reflect on that. And once you're through a bit of reflection for who you're serving, what services does APO provide that people might not have access to otherwise? And this question really boils down to what we saw in that definition of what does APO do for others that other organizations can't do? What makes APO unique, or what makes APO, your chapter on your campus, unique? What do you provide that the other student organizations or Greek life fraternities and sororities on campus just can't compare to APO? Take another second to reflect on these questions, and then we're going to move on to a quote from Henry Ford that I think applies here very well. So, coming together is a beginning, staying together is a process, and working together is success. Now, what does that mean as far as virtual outreach and programs? How does that tie in today for Spring Recruitment Training Day? Well, it's important to understand, and we've put this right at the beginning to really set the tone that every single member has the opportunity to improve chapter outreach. Effective outreach isn't just for officers, effective outreach is done most effectively by the entire chapter. That includes members that have been there for 3 years, for 2 years, 1 year, someone in their first semester, someone that's an officer, someone that's not an officer. It really doesn't matter in what capacity you serve the chapter, but outreach is best done by everyone. My network is different than my fellow brother's network, and being able to tap into both of those is going to give us outreach and is going to give us a greater population to serve to do the things we do beyond what other organizations are able to provide. For APO, coming together and joining as a chapter is the beginning. Staying together and navigating those processes itself is a process, and working together to implement these virtual outreach programs to result in effective and valid recruitment efforts, that's a success. Now we're going to dive into values exhibition. So the first session today really harnessed the idea of values proposition and navigating the value that your chapter brings to your campus, community, and beyond. Your values, whatever that may be, you need to make them mean something. So if we go back to this definition of outreach, your values are going to be a driving force so that your outreach is reflective of those values. Something that's important to note here is the difference between a value and an aspiration. And I'm a little ahead of myself here before we get to this question, but a value itself is a definitive principle that guides every single action of the chapter. So if you say, we value brotherhood, we'll keep it pretty baseline for now, but we value brotherhood, then brotherhood should be something that the chapter exhibits in its regular day to day. If your chapter is saying, oh, we strive to be brotherly and we want to build a strong brotherhood, that's more of an aspiration. That's not a value, because the value is not something your chapter is currently harnessing. That brotherhood is something you're striving towards, but you haven't quite owned yet. So understand that difference uh, when you ask yourself, what are your values versus what are your aspirations? And once you have that navigated mentally, how does your chapter embody its core values through virtual outreach programs? If brotherhood is the value that we're really trying to harness here, or that we're trying to exhibit here, what are you doing through your outreach and programs to show brotherhood? Are you holding doors for people? Keep your distance, but make a nice gesture. Are you creating programs that allow folks to get to know one another and to build friendships and relationships that really tie into the core of what brotherhood is? Think about those values and continue to ask yourself, what are we doing to showcase those? How are we exhibiting our values through all of the programs that we provide? One thing to keep in mind with values and how you decide to approach showcasing those and exhibiting those to others is, as far as understanding a brand or creating a brand for yourself, APO already has one. And as a chapter that's part of this national organization, you fall within that. So there's really no need to reinvent the wheel. As a chapter, your job is within that brand to create your own identity. So, whether you're creating a social media page or expanding the page you already have, designing marketing materials like brochures and such, utilize the branding that's already provided to you. APO has something called the Style and Graphics Guide. That's an awesome starting point and gives you the names of fonts that we use in our publications, the logos, the graphics, how to use them, when to use them, and even the color codes. So if you are creating something in a platform like Microsoft Word, or maybe even more advanced in like Adobe InDesign, you're able to take those color codes so that you can match the exact blue and the exact gold that we use in our day-to-day marketing on a national level. That APO style and graphics guide can be found on the APO website or even on the APO mobile resource app. If you haven't had the chance to download that, go ahead and do it. There are a ton of resources there, just like the resources you can find on the APO website resource library. Now, the game plan today is, if you're a chapter that maybe doesn't have a social media presence or don't have a whole lot of networking opportunities outside the chapter, aren't comfortable with that, don't really know how to describe APO, or just generally struggle to engage with members or others outside of the chapter, we're hoping today that through the information that we can provide you, you can leave with an idea of how to be consistent on social media, how to expand your on campus and community network, nailing that elevator speech, and regularly engaging with any audience confidently. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. So, social media best practices. Social media is a hot topic right now, especially since so many chapters have gone virtual. First thing to note here is to know your audience. Every single thing you post, every single effort, every single program should be deployed to reach a specific audience. If you're making a post about, welcome back to school, that's of course a post that could be for active members, and that could be for prospective new members. You have both audiences on campus coming back at whatever time of year. But no matter what your post is, know your audience, know who your target is, be intentional about who you're trying to reach through your virtual effort. Common audiences that you see for chapter outreach are going to be those current members, alumni, and potential new members. So, as you're developing these programs and really thinking about outreach and what your approach should be for that, Ask yourself, are you creating content for each audience and not just focusing on one or two more popular, making sure you're casting that wide net to reach all of your audiences? And also, are you using the correct platforms? It's important to understand uh, nuggets of information like Instagram is a popular platform for college age students. So, if you are trying to target college age students, Instagram may be the avenue that you go to. Now, that doesn't mean a Facebook page, for example, isn't going to reach some of those folks too, but Instagram may be your best bet. So, ask yourself again as you're creating these outreach efforts and programs, are you creating content for all of your audiences? And are you using the correct platforms to reach out to those audiences? As you begin to develop your program and really get a grasp of what your outreach is going to look like, it's important to understand what your chapter wants to accomplish this semester, quarter, year, whatever that needs to look like. But understand what you want to accomplish. Have some goals ready so that along the way you can check things off your list and say, yep, we reached this point, time to move on to the next one. That will help you all maintain consistency. And we'll talk about consistency a little more later, but that'll help you maintain consistency throughout all of your virtual outreach and programs. And next, get creative. Do things differently. Think outside of the box. Now that campuses have shifted, or most campuses have shifted to more virtual means, you have the opportunity to do things in a way that you've not done before. And despite the circumstances that we're all in, we've been given a little grace to try something new, be innovative, and kind of go against the status quo of what our usual operations may be. So get creative in the ways you want to be more visual or with written communications to help your chapter reach the goals that you set to accomplish this. When you're making your plan, here are some points that will be helpful in just the brainstorm part of it. Think back to your experience as a potential new member. What was a communication or even a visual representation that reeled you into understanding APO? Or even what was the one thing that kind of got you hooked on APO that really sold it to you? Take that and work your way backwards and try to figure out the core of what that communication was, what that outreach was, so that maybe you can replicate that for potential new members down the road. To go and accompany that, thinking back to your personal experiences, go ahead and ask new members their perception of what social media is for the chapter. So you've welcomed new members, get their feedback on the types of posts that you have, what was engaging, maybe what wasn't engaging, and have that conversation. During that conversation, it's going to lead you to examining past recruitment posts and to take a look at the questions we asked earlier. Are you reaching the audiences you want to reach? And are you doing so on the platform that works best for that audience? That's all part of this examination and evaluation to help you make your plan so that it can be the best it possibly can be for the year ahead. Last thing here, I know in APO world, we talk about calendars a ton and staying on time and being punctual and just having an idea of the timeline for the next semester or the next year. And virtual outreach and programs is really no excuse. Create a social media calendar to help you keep organized. That calendar can be something in Word or Excel or Outlook, whatever that needs to look like for your chapter, but stay organized and maintain it. That way, you not only have an archive of where you've been, but you have a plan for where you're going. Platforms like Hootsuite may also be really helpful in scheduling social media posts, especially if you're a chapter that's working across various platforms. You have the opportunity to schedule posts and have a more hands off approach. Maybe you plan your posts out a week at a time based on your calendar. You can upload those to Hootsuite. So Hootsuite pushes it out for your chapter and you're all set to go. So, as you take those things into consideration, you're reflecting on your own experience, you're chatting with new members, active members, and really uh, building your toolkit for what you want for a plan. You're going to turn it into something. So, once you have that plan or are generating that plan, you really want to zone in on consistency. And you need consistency for a few reasons. First and foremost, your online presence is going to be best recognized when you're consistent. The visual content that you put out there as people are scrolling endlessly through whatever platform they're on, if you are consistent, you will be recognized. Consistency also allows you to showcase your chapter in the best light possible. You're able to maintain a schedule and maintain a routine that regularly engages people and creates this positive correlation between someone that maybe has never been exposed to APO and APO itself. And last here, you're going to constantly be on the minds of the chapter and community. Again, if you're consistent, if you're posting regularly, you will be recognized by the algorithm or the different back-end processes that are set up on these social media platforms. As far as engagement ideas go, zone in on what you love about APO. Some ideas here could be account takeovers, Brothers of the Week. I know a lot of you already incorporate Brothers of the Week, or even behind the scenes of service events. You can allow a new member to try APO for a day, or maybe have a chapter meeting once a month where prospective new members can come in and see APO behind the scenes. But start to get creative and really innovative with the ideas and the approaches that you have, because virtual outreach and programs look different now than they ever have before. Take into consideration traditional versus non-traditional methods too. So we know flyers, campus publications are pretty common, especially if you're a campus that is in person or socially distant. But what about QR codes? So through this pandemic, a lot of restaurants, if you have ordered out or were in a restaurant that was, hygienic and maintaining distance and all of that, you might have seen that menus have transitioned from something physical to scanning a QR code on your phone so you can have the menu at your fingertips. Is that a concept that you can transition to APO? Rather than having a flyer on a wall that someone has to stop and read and maybe take time out of the trek on campus, can you post a page with a QR code where someone can scan it and be on their way and still get engaged with APO? Or subtly place a QR code in areas of publications or even, wherever you can find it, you can easily pass along a QR code and share it out there so that anybody can view it and anybody can access it pretty seamlessly. Prezi videos are another one. Prezi's a presentation platform that's pretty interactive, and you all can take advantage of what Prezi has to offer. It's kind of like Canva in some ways, where you can customize graphics, you can create presentations based on templates or not, but it's a great place to start if you are not familiar with Canva or other design platforms. Prezi Videos, Prezi Design, all sorts of creative outlets that they have on that platform could be something your chapter wants to look into. Lastly, Facebook Live has become way more popular in recent years than it has before, and is relatively new to Facebook, I would say. Uh, but Facebook Live could be a means of reaching an audience as well. You have to think, if you have a page where someone's following it, they get the notification that, hey, APO chapter X, Y, and Z has gone live. They can click that and be there with you live and engaged. So start navigating traditional versus non-traditional. How can you elevate a flyer? Is it through a QR code? Is it making that flyer digitally? Is it taking tabling virtually? Think about that, how you can transform the methods you've done before and to elevate it in a virtual capacity. Now, best practices. We have Instagram, Facebook that we're really going to tune into, and then just some quick tips for other platforms. So starting with Instagram, stickers like location, mentions, hashtags are all ways to increase your stories reach, but also quizzes, polls, stickers, all of those buttons that you see when you're going to post on Instagram help engagement. It works with the technology on the back end of the platform to put your post or your story more front facing for your followers. Something else to consider, so on Instagram, you can save a post, and that post then goes to the user's folder where they can return to it again. Creating savable content, again, gets you more outreach. If someone saves your post, the technology on the back end of Instagram says, hey, this is worthwhile. Someone wants to revisit it, wants to share it, wants to, whatever with it. So we're going to put them higher on the list of their followers to get them more visible because this seems to be what the people want. Also, beware of the algorithm. It is something that's tricky and something to get familiar with because the algorithm on Instagram is important to understand because you need to be maintaining engagement with your followers for them to even see you. So, making sure that as much as they're engaging with your post, vice versa is happening. You're engaging with their content. That way, you can be more relevant on their feed as they're scrolling and can make a more lasting impression on them as a user. Now, going over to Facebook, quality is definitely over quantity here. Just because you're posting, 15 times a day doesn't mean you're going to get better seen. It actually might get you hidden on someone's timeline pretty quickly. But if you're creating regular content that maybe 2, 3 times a week, and you're getting a lot of likes and you're getting a lot of engagement, that's going to matter so much more than posting a lot and getting little engagement. Timing, of course, is everything. That can be said for Instagram as well. Use your Facebook insights to let you know how people are engaging with your page and when, and utilize that to your advantage. So if you see posts on Tuesday evenings or even Sunday evenings as everybody's anticipating Monday to come by, if that's when you're getting the most engagement, that could be when your most important messages go out because you know you're hitting a wider audience. Utilize that throughout the week to fine tune your calendar along the way. Trying video is a great way on Facebook to get the message out there. Sometimes we don't have the time to read a post. Sometimes text is not the most engaging thing. If you have a video or can post a video, can create a video and have the technology to do so, um, trying video on Facebook is pretty straightforward. Use that as another means to engage some folks versus the standard text or even graphic post. And don't be afraid to recycle those top posts. So if you have something that's gotten a lot of engagement, bring it on back. You can refer to it another time if it's relevant, or you can just share it so. But don't be afraid to recycle that top post to continue engagement and to help boost the traction on your chapter's page. For other platforms, just two quick items to note on Twitter. Bios are searchable. Did you know that? The information that's in a bio for Twitter can be searched. So make sure your chapter's bio is A, well spoken, and B, has some keywords in there that might get you to pop up on someone's search if they're searching for service or leadership or something on campus. Start to think about that so that as audiences that don't know about chapter, how can you end up in front of them? Lastly, here on Snapchat, consider using geo filters. I know I've used them personally for events pre-pandemic where my family got together for a holiday and we all wanted a silly filter to be able to use on our Snapchats and post to our friends. So we took the radius of the family member's house I was at, and I think I paid maybe $3 to have this geo filter on for the duration of the day so that we can post these funny pictures. Consider doing something like that around campus if you're operating in person, socially distant, or even in the town that most students are in or for an event. You can use those geo filters in a lot of creative ways and get creative with the way that you're designing them. Snapchat's really fun with that. Moving on from best practices, we're throwing in another reminder here. We talked about it before, but social media, an outreach method, an outreach program goes beyond chapter officers. Every single member can play a role, even if you aren't the PR chair or whoever runs the social media accounts. All members can get involved by sharing posts, liking posts. Look to members for content as well. You can get outside of your own creative box to tune into the ideas of members that may have something super innovative that gets you a lot of engagement. That can be really fun to hive mind and get a lot of ideas on the table to keep your content fresh. Now, virtual information sessions. We're going to switch from social media to information sessions because these are a pretty integral part of the new member experience or the recruitment experience across the fraternity. So many chapters use virtual information sessions, and now that we're virtual, we have to find a way to shift. So, information sessions, just like in person, have to be interactive and engaging and certainly express the value of the organization. It will not be worth your chapter's time to get together a group of potential new members on Zoom. Say APO is a service organization that does X, Y, and Z on this campus. All right, what questions do you have? You're not giving those potential new members a whole lot of information to ask about and not properly introducing Alpha Phi Omega to them to be engaged and intrigued and ideally come back for more. So, what you'll want to do when you're trying to construct your information session is to first start by defining those values of your chapter. Going back to the conversation from the very beginning of today, what are your chapter's values? What are they? Narrow them down. 3 to 5 values, get them on the sheet, share them with the whole chapter, brainstorm together, but define what those values are. That's your starting point. Once you have those values, how are you going to communicate them? What is your values exhibition? How are you going to take brotherhood and turn it into something actionable? How are you going to take responsiveness and turn it into something actionable? There's so many values out there. You can do a quick Google search and land yourself on a page with over 100 values that you can look at and decide which fits your chapter. And then you need to take them a step further and figure out how you show that. What does your chapter do to exhibit that? And again, remember, a value is something, it's a guiding principle for the day to day of your chapter. It's not something you're aspiring to be or a value you're aspiring to have eventually. You already got it. So, how are you going to communicate that? And lastly, what are you going to do to put that into action? What resources do you need to show the values of your chapter? Is it some kind of designing platform because the way that you've decided to approach it requires such? Is it the way that you've decided to communicate those values is through social media? So, what do you need to get set up? Or if you're already on something like Facebook or Instagram, what do you need to elevate the efforts that you're already doing? Define, communicate, implement are going to be the 3 steps to helping your information sessions evolve. Now, follow up and follow through. We've talked about outreach, what it is, how we take outreach, apply it to exhibiting those values. You have this information session where you're trying to engage potential new members, get them to keep coming back to APO and ideally join the organization. So once you have those names on a list, what do you do with them? You've made some new connections. As your chapter continues to expand and expand its outreach and capitalize on those core values, people are going to notice. So you're generating that list. You need to ask yourself, does the chapter have an efficient and effective method to tracking potential new connections? And I'm going to share with you a resource that exists for you all to take advantage of in a minute. But just ask yourself this question: do you have a way to track these new connections? Is it on paper? Is it digitally? What does that look like for your chapter? And once you've asked yourself if you have an efficient and effective method of doing so, how do you take that and then maintain engagement with those existing or new connections? What's your plan once you have those names on an Excel sheet or on a sheet of paper, which I recommend you move digitally so it can be, shared and easily navigated. But how do you maintain engagement once you have the name? What does your connection look like? How are you communicating your values over time? It's not just a once and done, it's ongoing. We've talked about busting out of traditional recruitment models, and part of that is the idea of ongoing recruitment. So, how are you maintaining engagement long term beyond that formal engagement period and throughout the year? Some of the resources to help you follow up and follow through are a potential new member tracking sheet that is available on the APO website, and it allows you to gather a list of potential new members in one place and to efficiently document your communications. So it's a spreadsheet that has a few tabs, and the first one actually gives you a summary of all of the tabs to follow. So it's broken up fall, winter, spring, summer. And within each of those, you can add all of your names. And for each person's name, you have contact information, the year of school they're in, their major, all that key information that's kind of helpful to see at a glance. And there's a bit of an intuitive nature to this spreadsheet where it takes the information you submit and puts it on this summary sheet so you can see in the fall of whatever year you're in, you have X amount of potential new members, this many are freshmen, this many are juniors, and so and so. So it gives you some stats based on the information you put in there. And as you go through and maintain these connections, you're able to document whether or not someone went through with joining the organization. And again, on that summary, it says, if this person did join, great, we'll mark it here. If not, here's where we'll mark that. And this is your retention percentage for the efforts that you're making and how many people you're actually attracting. It's pretty cool. I definitely encourage you to check it out. Even if you're not an Excel person, it's wildly helpful. The next resource is Opening Lines for Texts and DMs. So this one will help you build connections through online conversations. I said earlier that one of our goals is to help you all be the most confident you possibly can be with establishing connections and starting the conversation about APO. And this resource may help you do just that. So if someone were to follow your chapter's Instagram page, are you sending them a message back? Hey, thanks for the follow. That's the kind of information that's in here. Just some quick one-liners to help you build those connections and maintain engagement. And the last here is the Spring Recruitment Planning Guide. So President Rob Coop put out a charge to all chapters to get ahead of the spring term and to begin planning what spring recruitment looks like. So this guide is going to help you expand your chapter's outreach through impactful recruitment tactics and strategy. And to be honest, just like that guide, this whole spring recruitment training day is helping you do just that. It's helping you navigate the questions and conversations to build a really solid spring recruitment plan. Go ahead and take a look at any of these resources on the APO website or on the APO mobile resource app. Have it at your fingertips, get looking at it, meet with other members of the chapter to start reading through these resources and building your toolkit for how to have the best recruitment efforts possible this upcoming calendar year. Now, next steps, we give you all of this information. We give you best practices. We help you understand how to exhibit your values. What can your chapter do now? The first step is to start the conversation. Talk about outreach and programs. Have an evaluation period of what you're currently doing and move forward to transform them into either something virtual or just something bigger, better, badder than what you've ever had before. That takes me to elevate. So once you start the conversation, based on the outcome of that evaluation, find 2 to 3 ways to amp up your chapter's efforts. And then once you have those 2 to 3 ways, take action, put them into place. Incorporate those virtual outreach and programs into the chapter's spring recruitment plan. That plan is something that may need to be adjusted ongoing, but should be solidified and ready to rock and roll. So come the spring semester, you have a plan and it's just a matter of taking action. We want to thank you all for attending our session and for tuning in, hearing more about social media, virtual outreach and programs. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. But otherwise, here's some helpful social media stuff for the national fraternity on Facebook, Twitter, even LinkedIn. You can reach out to us at chapter_services@apo.org with any questions you have. Keep in mind, just following this session, there's going to be a roundtable discussion on social media as well. So you'll get to meet with Donnie and talk about all things social media, throw out some ideas, and have a really fun conversation about what that might look like for your chapter. Thanks again for tuning in with us. We are really happy to see you all here. Those of you that have stuck it out with us through the rest of the day. It's been a long day, but it's been so fun. So thank you for your time, and we hope to see some awesome recruitment efforts this upcoming spring.